Okay, so thankfully when removing the bezel, it's actually quite easy. There's actually 3 or 4 retainer clips. So you just pull it out and it'll pop right off. And then back here, both of these are just held in. Hopefully you can kind of see right there. It's clipped on the side. So what I always do is just pull the one side out and then let it pop out. And then that side comes loose. So as you can see, there's these little slots on either side, which these little tabs slide right into. And so you just pop one side off and then you can angle it enough that the other one will come undone. And then the way I always found it easiest to do, this is a 3/8 socket set, 3/8 adapter bit on the drill. And then all we gotta do is remove these 2 little screws and the radio will slide right out. So we got the bit on there. It's a 9/32 bit. And all we gotta do, take it out. And a good tip if you're ever working on any sort of interior paneling, accessories, whatever, if it has a screw, keep them all in the same place. Now, since the work I need to do with the radio is specifically only for the harness, I just unplug the harness from the factory harness and the radio. That way, I don't have to undo all of this and try to unroute those. Okay, so now what we're going to be doing is I have to wire the ground wire on this into the parking brake so that it will think the parking brake is constantly activated, allowing me to use the new backup camera. And using a Dremel, some rough coarse sandpaper, as well as some finishing paper, we're going to try to smooth out this bottom piece and get it nice and level. Okay, so all we've been doing is making light passes with the Dremel. Just trying to smooth out this bottom piece and then using rough sandpaper to kind of finish it up. It's already looking way more level. So I've been continuing to work with the Dremel, just kind of using it, trying to round out these edges, trying to keep it as close to that as possible because that's what it looked like when it was made. So trying to keep it, you know, smooth and consistent. And after using the Dremel to grind away the material, I've been using 60 grit to smooth it out and kind of shave everything down level, and then moving up to 120 to make it nice and smooth. Alright, so this is where I'm going to be keeping it for now. And since you probably don't know, when I first received this bezel, you see how that plastic insert is raised up? That's actually exactly how the radio piece was. This radio bezel was intended to fit a 6.2 inch touchscreen Double Din. So since I bought a 7-inch one, intentionally, I knew this was going to happen. I actually had to shave down that entire wall. Initially, given the measurements, the bezel was 0.2 inches too small all the way around to fit it. So I was hoping that I could actually just shave these walls a little bit thinner, but that didn't work. So now I'm going to go ahead and start on adjusting the radio harness to get the backup camera to work. Anytime you're wiring in a harness, always use something like butt plugs or solder to get the best connection. So I'm going to go ahead and get started on fixing the radio harness so I can get the backup camera to work. And anytime I've wired in a radio, I always use butt connectors because apart from soldering, it's one of the best connections you can get, as well as secure the wiring. Also, just as kind of a extra safety measure, anytime I finish with the connections, I always electrical tape them together so that stress cannot be put on the connection itself. And then just a quick tip for anybody who hasn't done car accessory wiring before. Most of the time it's pretty straightforward. Make a good connection with the butt connectors. These are called crimpers, and you can actually use it to strip the wiring if need. And you can find these connectors, electrical tape, and crimpers at pretty much any automotive place, home improvement stores like Home Depot and Lowe's, or even Walmart. Alright, now that I've got it all uncovered, you can see here, this is how all the connections are made. And every single one of these is secure. The wire's in there and pinched in by metal tubing to make sure it holds together and maintains a connection, whether the wires, which allows it to maintain a connection even if the wires themselves are not touching each other. Also, if there's any wires that you're not using, like these wires right here, trim them so that no wire is showing, and then electrical tape them together and move them away from the harness itself. It's just a good extra step. Okay, now that I've got these apart, this is the wire I will be using to wire to the ground wire, which in this case is the black wire. And what this will hopefully do is allow the radio to believe that the park is engaged so that the backup camera will work. And the reason I'm doing this is because any aftermarket radio has a safety measure where if the parking brake is not engaged or the vehicle is not in park, it won't allow you to view videos. This way no one can watch videos while driving. Now, if you use these butt connectors properly, you won't be able to just pull these wires out of this connection, so you'll actually have to cut them at each end and then restrip the wire and then reconnect them. Now, whenever you're stripping a wire, there's two things you need to make sure of. One, you need to make sure that you didn't take too much of the coating off, that wiring will be exposed because it could make contact and cause issues. And two, you need to make sure it's long enough to be able to make contact. So when dealing with most wiring, what the company will do is actually already cut a piece of the rubber coating off, and usually they leave this much wire exposed. This usually ends up being too much. Also, anytime you're going to use a set of wires in order to wire in something separate, it is best to twist the wires tightly together as possible, including some of the rubber coating. This stops them from separating. So this is what it's going to end up looking like when you go to make the connection. Now simply all you do is take those crimpers, use the top of it, and pinch this blue piece down. Okay, so this is what it's going to end up looking like. It won't be able to crimp as much on this side because there's more wire going in, but it should still make a good connection. Now before we tidy this up, we're going to go test it. Okay, so the way I have the backup camera wired in is it will come on when the reverse lights come on. Now, if you want to put your vehicle in reverse without starting it, simply turn the key all the way to on and then slide it down to reverse. Just make sure you're holding the brake. Okay, so after a little bit of reading and just kind of trial and error, I went and grabbed the user manual and I got it working. Look at that. So clean. So the issue I was having is right there in the top right, you can see where it says 3 camera in. That, unfortunately, was not working for me, so after moving it to 4 for video in, it popped right up. Now, the way I wired the camera in is it only draws power when the reverse lights are on, so if I slide back into park, you can see it goes away. Straightforward. So now that's all left to do is put everything back together, tidy up that harness, and enjoy the new radio. Okay, this is all back together again. This is all trimmed up. We're gonna go get it back in. Okay, get everything back together. Now, we're gonna cut the radio on and just make sure that everything's still working. Also, a cool thing to note is, since I have unplugged the radio, it has lost power entirely, but it's still kept my wallpaper and home screen app settings. So we're gonna go ahead, put it on camera. All right, camera's up. Look at that, pops right up. This is gonna be such a big help.